Hey everyone, welcome to an episode of Let's Code Elixir Live. I hope everything's working, audio, all that stuff. So let's get started. I don't want to waste anybody's time. So I'm going to hop right into the code editor and then we'll take a look and then I'll kind of like talk us through where we're at, what we're trying to achieve in this episode right here. And I think I'm going to continue off from the previous episode where I was saying that we want to have some kind of structure to our data. So let's start off there. So I'm going to head over into the code over here. And let's take a look at what we've got here. So in the previous episode, we kind of created this file, this binary file, which is what we use to store our data so that, our project has a bit of persistence. And what that means is the ability to store data without actually having to use a database. So in this case, what we're using is the file, the binary file over here that we've got. And in the previous episode, we kind of like wrote all the logic to make all that work, where if we don't have a database, it creates a file for us where it's using that to kind of like store all of the information that we put in there. So if I start up this project right now, what I can actually do is I can do something like games.all games, and it will still load the game from before, even though I don't have anything, because it's actually loading it from that binary file that we used previously. So I can actually add another game in here as well. Now that, it's pretty simple for me to do that because I already wrote a function here. But from the previous episode, we discussed that we wanted to have some kind of structure like to our data. Like we want to enforce certain keys. We want our user to not just type whatever they want in here. They actually have to fill in the columns like the name, the producer, the year. And we have a place where we define all of that data. So in this episode right here, I'm going to be talking to you guys and gals about structs. So let's get started over here. So I've got my lib directory. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder called entities for now, because I don't know any other name to use. And then in here, I'm going to create a new file called game. And basically in here, we're going to have games.entities.game. And basically this game will represent our data structure for a game. So yeah, by the way, if you're liking what you're seeing here, give us a like and give us a comment also to let us know what you guys think. We're always trying to improve our live stream to make the content more useful for everyone. So let's continue. So what we have here is we have a module. So we just defined a new module. So a struct live starts out as a simple module. And then what we can do is then we can define a struct. So def struct. And then here, what we can do is we can say it has a name, and it has a year, and it has a producer. And the cool thing is we can also even do something like enforce keys. So we can say that you have to define a name, a year, and producer. All right. So now we can actually use this struct. So if I go into the code, so I'm going to reload my project here. So I'm going to do something like game equals, so I can do something like games.entities.game. And here I'm going to do something like name, resident evil 2. So let's say if I just do that, it's going to give me some kind of error to tell me that the following keys must also be given. So that's kind of like getting us closer to where we want to go. So as you can see here, it's telling us that, we need to have the year and the producer as well. So why don't we just go ahead and create that? So the Resident Evil 2, I believe, was released last year. So year 2019. And the producer is, let's say, Capcom. All right. So actually now we can actually create that struct, right? So now we have some kind of a struct and we can actually enforce what keys go in there. This also kind of protects us, like even if we don't use enforce keys, it makes sure that the structure is in the correct format. Like it has to have a producer, a year. We can't just put any random key. So like, for example, if I do like platforms, which is maybe something we'll add later, but let's say like X box, it's going to tell me that, you can't just randomly add whatever you want. Like this is how it's different from a map, is when you have a certain structure that you want to enforce, right? So, a map is just like you can use whatever you want. You can add as many keys as you want. There's no restriction or anything like that at all. Like you can just do whatever you want. A struct is when you need to define certain things in your data structure. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to go back and then we're actually going to use our struct. So instead of enforcing a game here, we actually have to pass a struct like into our file. So we can't just add any random data in here. Like a map will just not cut it. So what we can actually do here is we can also use a bit of pattern matching. So that's another thing we're going to introduce in here, where you can only add a game that has a certain struct. Like you can't just add a map, right? Like, I mean, technically if I pass a map into here, it'll still work. So we need to combine our struct with a bit of pattern matching in our function. So let's look at that. So basically I'm going to do an alias here, and then I'm going to do a games.entities.game. So now what I can do is what an alias does is it allows me to access the module without referencing the whole thing. So naturally, if I don't use an alias, what's going to happen is, let's say I want to do like enforce that I have to pass an actual game in here. I have to do games.entities.game, and then I'll just be able to do like something like that equal game. So this is a little bit cumbersome because, we only have one game here, game module entity here. And I want to be able to just do something like that. So an alias allows me to do that. So alias games.entities and game, right? So that will pretty much solve our problem of having just anyone pass whatever data that we want, restrict that from happening in here. So I'm going to delete my persistent, this games.bin, and we should be able to now create a game using our struct and pass it and store it inside of our database, if you will. All right, so I'm going to close this out and I'm going to start up my project again. So you can see here, I'm going to type it out. So I'm going to do something like game equals games. So I'm going to do something like games.entity. So because I didn't alias this module inside of my IEX in my console, I have to type out the whole thing. So yeah, just letting you guys know in case you get confused as to why I've already done it in here in this file, but I'm still typing out the whole thing. That's because just because I did it in this file doesn't mean it's being done everywhere. So here I'm going to type in Resident Evil 3. Year is 2020, and the producer is Capcom. So now I have that game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call games.add. So games.add, and then I'm going to pass the game in, and everything should actually work just fine. So if I do now games.all-games, it's going to return me the actual data with proper structure, the structure that I defined. So if I go in to look at the game here, it says it can't open, so I can open it. You can see that there is now a struct in here. It's actually defined as a module in my project, and yeah, that's great. That's exactly what we want, right? So yeah, that's pretty much going to be it for this episode. I want to keep it short. So in this episode, we covered a couple of things. We covered some pattern matching, right? And then we covered aliases and we covered structs. So 3 very key things in Elixir. If you're going to code Elixir, you're going to need to know these things. So actually, before I end the episode, let me continue a little bit on and show you what I mean by pattern matching. So let's say we try to add another map. Let's try, I use this function game add, and then I type in a map. Let's see what happens, right? I'm not going to actually change anything in the code because the code is actually already working as I intended it. So I'm not going to change anything there. So let's take games.add, and then I'm just going to try and type a map and maybe whatever, I'm just going to type in garble and, see what happens. So I'm going to get this error now because I'm making my function a little bit more strict by defining what structure I can actually pass into here. And this is one of the cool features of pattern matching, is it's going to match the pattern of what you're passing into the function, and it has to be valid, right? So if I actually wanted to make this function also work with a map, I could do something like def add, and then I can make a very generic function and not define anything, and then I can call the same thing. And then we'll obviously have to make this function, an abstract, so we can call it again, even without having to define it like repeatedly here. But I don't want to go into that too deep. I think covering 3 basic things in this episode is already good enough. I want to keep it short. So basically, in this episode, we covered aliases. We covered a little bit of pattern matching. And then we created a struct. So that was the main thing of this episode, the struct, and how to enforce certain data structures in our projects. So if anybody has any questions, now is the time. Let me know if you want to ask anything. I'll pretty much answer it live. So right now it's very difficult for me to find time to do these live streams, so I don't want to commit to a certain specific time yet. But these videos I believe are still helping people anyway. So give us a like. Also give us a comment. Let us know how we're doing. Let me know how I'm doing. And if you have any feedback, leave them in the comments below. Let me know what you want to see in future episodes, and I'll take that into consideration. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. So with that, I want to wrap up this episode. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.